Good morning once again. I'm Stephanie Ruhle, joining you live from Times Square, and welcome to Money, Power, Politics. It is 9 a.m. on the East Coast, 6 a.m. out west, and check your calendar, boys and girls, because we are just 91 days away from the midterms. And as we come on the air today, the Senate Judiciary is just about to meet to vote on the confirmation of Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. Blanche is expected to make it through after making some sort of a deal with Senators Cornyn and Tillis about the president's settlement with the IRS. So let's get ready and bring in Michael Schnell, MS Now congressional reporter. She is standing just outside the committee hearing. Sam Stein is here, managing editor for The Bulwark and MS Now political contributor. And Barb McQuaid, a veteran federal prosecutor and former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. Barb, you know I'm turning to you first. You called this deal that Blanche cut with the Republican senators hollow. Why do you say that?
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't really given back anything that matters. He did put in writing that this deal applies only to past tax returns. Well, we already knew that. And experts have said that that amount is estimated to equal $100 million of a gift from the taxpayers to Donald Trump. And that it only applies to the named individuals, Donald Trump, his sons, and his businesses. Well, that's kind of the whole thing. So these limitations are really nothing. I think these senators wanted to show a little moxie. They really backed down and caved and didn't get anything substantive here. And so we're going to go through the motions here, and suddenly they're on board, and they've really achieved nothing.
But the thing is, Sam, they show little to no moxie because of what we just experienced over the last 6 days with Tom Tillis and John Cornyn. Now you've got the entire media universe and the American public looking at this deal, going through every word of it with a fine-tooth comb. And we can see that, to Barb's point, this thing is hollow.
Yeah, it's pretty hollow. Barb's absolutely right on the merits. And I would just say the only potentially positive addition that came from this whole escapade is that we have on the record Donald Trump said a couple of days speaking publicly about his desire for the weaponization front, for the immunity, speaking publicly about his desire to see January 6 protesters and rioters get reparations. There's not an insignificant cost to that. It's all political, of course, right? You have the president saying, yeah, these people who destroyed the Capitol, who assaulted police officers, do deserve some monetary reparation. But in terms of actually seeing this thing go through, you know, theoretically, as soon as he's confirmed, Todd Blanche could issue another memorandum saying, actually, you know, I've reversed my reversal. And that's for the immunity. It does still apply to the very people who were initially supposed to receive it. So substantively, very little is done, and it appears that Todd Blanche will get passed through the committee and then very likely confirmed by the full Senate. Politically, I think there is some damage that was done by this whole charade.
We're actually watching Chuck Grassley speak right now. The hearing started about 3 minutes ago. Michael, you are right outside the room. Set the stage for us.
Yeah, Steph, as was mentioned, this is likely to go through because Tom Tillis and John Cornyn are now on board, and there are certainly holes in this agreement. And I think it's interesting that Cornyn and Tillis themselves are kind of recognizing tacitly, but in a way, that this did fall short of what they had initially hoped for. John Cornyn yesterday was talking to reporters, and he said the only way to make this permanent and legal binding would have been, for the IRS immunity portion, would have been President Trump himself as a person in that settlement, reopening it and then slimming down those terms. But of course, Trump was not going to do that. So he said the next best thing we could get was in writing this clarification. And then on the portion of the anti-weaponization fund, Tom Tillis said that if this does go to court, there is now a signed document by the acting attorney general saying it does not exist. So in a way, they are recognizing that it didn't come as far as they wanted to. In fact, John Cornyn yesterday said, we did as much as we can. Tom Tillis said with that anti-weaponization fund, it's the law that allows it to be established. So Congress should now look towards changing the law so something like this cannot be used. But certainly, again, the moral of the story is this is going to go through because these two senators cut a deal that was not as far as what they had wanted. So now what we're going to see come down today is that there are going to be a number of speeches from senators, and then we do expect Todd Blanche to advance through the Senate Judiciary Committee. But I would say that it's not going to be a cakewalk from there. Once this goes to the full Senate floor, there are still a handful of Republicans who are skeptical skeptical of Todd Blanche and have not yet committed to supporting him. Yesterday, Bill Cassidy would not even comment on the matter. In the past, he's voiced concerns about the fund, about the audit immunity, but also about the fact that this is somebody who was President Trump's former personal attorney, now going into an independent role. He wants to make sure that Todd Blanche will not be doing the president's bidding in the job. And then you have people like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski who want to talk to John Cornyn and Tom Tillis about this deal. So there are certainly still a few hurdles, but as has been mentioned, because the two cut this watered down deal, it does look like Todd Blanche is going to get the permanent job.
Okay, then can we just go back to senators like Bill Cassidy will want to make sure that Blanche won't be carrying Donald Trump's water? What words could Todd Blanche say, honestly, that would give anyone that firm assurance? Because it wasn't long ago that Bill Cassidy, despite his reservations, voted to confirm RFK, and look where that got us.
Yeah, and there was also the move by Bill Cassidy initially to vote for the War Powers Resolution with Iran, and then after having a conversation in the Situation Room, he changed his vote to no. This is when we get into the conversation of those profiles and courage among Republican lawmakers. Will they take a stand at this moment, or are they going to decide that they're going to take a deal or take some sort of compromise, vote yes, and move on? That is going to be the key question here. Of course, Bill Cassidy is somebody who is ripe for that profile and courage, given the fact that he just lost his re-election bid to a Trump-backed challenger. His President Trump's reservations with him have been no secret. So certainly if it would be anybody, it could be Bill Cassidy. But again, we have seen people come up to the precipice of trying to have that profile and courage and go against President Trump and at the last minute fall back. So we're going to have to see if somebody like Bill Cassidy will take that step. But to your point, Steph, I mean, Todd Blanche has said a number of times he's going to be an independent attorney general. Michael, whether or not folks trust his word.
I'm going to interrupt you because Senator Chuck Grassley is speaking, and they're actually speaking about the so-called anti-weaponization fund. Let's listen in.
For one half of what Tillis and Cornyn were trying to accomplish should have been accomplished very easy, and it seems like it took the longest part to get settled. So I thank everybody for their patience in doing it. Turning to today's agenda, I'd like to say a few words about Mr. Blanche. The Justice Department has thrived under his leadership. Among other things, Mr. Blanche has led major successes in thwarting federal program fraud, ending racial discrimination, and restoring the safety of every American. I'd like to take a few moments to reflect on that last one, the safety of Americans, primary job of the Attorney General and the Justice Department. At the end of the hearing, Mr. Blanche stated that his job was, quote, securing safety for every American, end quote. He is absolutely right. It's clear that from his track record that Mr. Blanche has succeeded. We've seen report after report showcasing the department's increase in violent crime arrests, disruption of terrorist activities, and the seizure of illegal firearms and controlled substances. The Council on Criminal Justice recently issued 2026 mid-year report on crime trends. The results are very astounding. The reported rates for homicide dropped 51% from its peak over 9 years ago. Carjackings down 73%, residential burglaries down 56%, motor vehicle thefts down 51%. Now, critics might say, well, there was a spike of crime in 2020. So it looks, let's look at the reported crime rates in 26 compared to 2019. Sexual assaults down 13%. Assaults with firearms down 17%. Robbery down 41%. Drug offenses down 15%. And that's just a few of the statistics I could give you. Without objection, I want to enter this report in the record. Is there any objection? I hear none. The Washington Times noted, quote, homicides are on a track to hit the lowest point in recorded U.S. history amid an overall decline in crime nationwide, end quote. Based on these stats, it's evident that no Justice Department in our nation's history can boast the successes of this Justice Department under Mr. Blanche's leadership. Still, the critics can't bring themselves to acknowledge this reality. The Washington Times stated, quote, "The encouraging news was met with little explanation as to why crime, especially homicides, has cratered after spiking from 2020 to 2022, end of quote." That's a strange thing for them to say. The press has no explanation for what changed between then and now, because I can think of an explanation. I think every American in this country who feels safer at home and in their towns and cities can think of an explanation. It's very obvious. Todd Blanche's Justice Department has reprioritized the safety of Americans after the Biden administration opened borders to violent criminals and then turned a blind eye to heinous crimes that were happening around the country. The Biden administration was too busy weaponizing the Justice Department against political opponents to stop real crime. And so please don't forget, whistleblowers and media outlets reported that the Biden FBI even reassigned personnel from investigating child sex crimes to work on January 6 cases. So it's no surprise that when the Trump administration secured the borders and Mr. Blanche did his job prioritizing safety of Americans, crime has come down. But despite clear evidence that America is safer under Mr. Blanche's leadership, some have alleged that he doesn't care about victims. I can think of plenty of victims who would disagree with that. This committee received a letter from more than 300 angel families who strongly support Mr. Blanche. They praised his commitment to, quote, core public safety priorities, stopping illegal immigration, eliminating cartels and transnational criminal organizations, ending trafficking in dangerous drugs and human beings, and protecting American communities from violent crime, end of quote of their statement. As we heard from one of these angel moms at the hearing, Jennifer Boss, her testimony was heart-wrenching as she told about her daughter's tragic and gruesome death. She stated, quote, "From the time I've spent talking to Todd Blanche, I knew immediately that he makes victims a priority. Under his direction, the DOJ has engaged directly with angel families and treated us not like political props, but as partners in preventing future tragedies, and that's all that we've ever asked for," end of quote. Ms. Boss concluded by stating, quote, "I 100% believe that Todd Blanche will be one who can deliver justice, saving lives of people who will never know it," end of quote. Ms. Boss knows that America is safer with Mr. Blanche at the helm. The angel families know it, and Americans across the country know it. Today, I'm not only voting to advance Todd Blanche's nomination, I'm voting for the safety of the American people. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Reflect on the fact that as we meet today, there are thousands, literally tens of thousands of men and women in the United States who got up this morning and put on a badge or picked up their briefcase and went to work to make sure that we would be safe. They are in law enforcement all across the United States of America. They count on this system of justice, as we all do, to give us not only safety in our homes, but also fairness when it comes to treatment by the government. The man we are discussing this morning seeks to be the #1 law enforcement enforcer of the United States of America, the Attorney General of the United States, the highest ranking law enforcement position. And what have we learned in the last few weeks when it comes to Todd Blanche? We have learned that simply his word is not enough for most of us, not even for some of my Republican friends. Even his word under oath is not credible enough. We have a demand by colleagues that I support, a demand that Mr. Blanche, when it comes to important promises to the American people, put it in writing. Put it in writing. And in fact, he did. Mr. Chairman, the political escapade of the last week has made it clearer than ever that Todd Blanche has no business serving as our nation's chief law enforcement officer. 2 Republican members of this committee said they would not vote for Mr. Blanche unless the J6 cop beater slush fund was permanently and irrevocably terminated. And of course, these 2 members, and I support their position, said to Mr. Blanche, you have to put it in writing if you're going to say those words. President Trump responded, as we might have guessed, as he always does, by doubling down on his position and personally attacking our colleagues. To state the obvious, Mr. Blanche's statement on the slush fund and the IRS immunity agreement are not signed by the parties to the settlement agreement and are therefore unenforceable. The parties could still sue to enforce the agreement, and the cop beaters fund can easily be revived with a new order from the Department of Justice 15 minutes after Mr. Blanche is confirmed as Attorney General. Indeed, the president himself has loudly telegraphed that's his plan. This is the exact issue that the 2 senators identified as a basis for their objection to his nomination, Blanche's nomination. To my Republican colleagues, you gave Mr. Blanche the benefit of the doubt when you supported his nomination to be Deputy Attorney General. 17 months later, there is no doubt where his loyalty will lie. Take a look at this promise, unprecedented, I believe, in the history of the United States, that somehow Mr. Blanche engineered an agreement, an understanding, a settlement, you name it, that said that Donald Trump will never be held responsible for any violations of tax crimes before the date of this document that was signed. Saying that the president can commit any crime in the tax code and not be held personally responsible? Does that sound like he is being held to an accountability that we all expect of every single American? Instead of serving the American people and upholding the rule of law and the Constitution, Mr. Blanche has aided and abetted the most corrupt administration in the history of the United States. Prior to this hearing, Mr. Blanche told me he, quote, made a mistake, close quote, by creating the January 6th slush fund. Where did he say it? In my office, with witnesses, my staff, to what I'm about to say. When I asked him about this under oath, Mr. Blanche falsely claimed that he never made this statement. That's not true. Mr. Blanche's willingness to casually lie under oath about a statement he made in a room full of witnesses shows the lengths he will go to avoid offending President Trump. Why doesn't he want to concede he made a mistake? We all do that from time to time, right? No, no, no. Manly MAGA leaders do not admit a mistake or use the word sorry. So he was held accountable by the president. Mr. Blanche has claimed he recused himself from matters involving President Trump in his personal capacity. Yet he personally signed the agreement releasing President Trump, his family, and businesses from tax liability. When asked how DOJ justified the slush fund's outrageous $1.776 billion price tag, Mr. Blanche refused to answer. He shows contempt for this committee and for our history by refusing to admit that the sum was chosen to signal support for the January 6th rioters, and many of us remember when they attacked and invaded the Capitol. Those rioters shamelessly invoked 1776 to compare themselves to American revolutionaries. Give me a break. Mr. Blanche told me that a ruling against the settlement was, quote, a hit piece personally directed at him. This is no surprise coming from the man who declared that the Justice Department is, quote, at war, close quote, with the courts. These are not the words of someone who would serve our nation as a top law enforcement official. One of Mr. Blanche's first acts as Deputy Attorney General was to issue a memo gutting DOJ's crypto crime enforcement, which allowed the president to rake in $1.4 billion in a crypto windfall last year, even as Americans reported billions of dollars in cryptocurrency fraud losses. The president did just fine, thank you. Meanwhile, Mr. Blanche still has, through his children and grandchildren, $150,000 in crypto assets. Last year, under Mr. Blanche's leadership, more than 1,000 FBI personnel were pulled off key law enforcement priorities. What was a higher priority than their oath they've taken to uphold the law? They were directed to flag Epstein records and look for any mention of Donald Trump. Mr. Blanche refused to tell me who gave this order, but former Attorney General Bondi made it clear, saying Blanche was, quote, in charge of the Epstein files. And when the Epstein Files Transparency Act forced DOJ to release the files, not only did the department delay reviewing and producing it, it recklessly failed to redact hundreds of survivors' personal information, victimizing them all over again. And they testified before this committee under oath to that fact. Meanwhile, the names of powerful Epstein cronies remain protected, in clear violation of the law. When scrutiny of the Epstein cover-up intensified, Mr. Blanche participated in secret meetings in the White House Situation Room, of all places, to strategize about protecting Trump, not Epstein survivors. Mr. Blanche volunteered to interview convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell, a transparent attempt to exonerate President Trump. Just days later, she was transferred to a minimum security camp, which is unheard of, unprecedented for serious sex offenders like her. Mr. Blanche agreed to meet with Epstein survivors after months of pleas, only when his nomination was in jeopardy and a member of this committee said he wouldn't consider voting for him unless he met with these survivors. He finally met with them for almost an hour. As one survivor, Dan Obinsky, who testified before this committee, said, the meeting was a box-checking exercise. Mr. Blanche refused to take accountability for redaction failures, and he wouldn't commit to following their suggested investigative leads. It is clear that Mr. Blanche hopes to sweep the Epstein scandal under the rug. I thank those survivors for the courage they showed in this room today and around the country for continuing to advocate for survivors and speak truth to power. Mr. Blanche has played a key role in terminating thousands of Department of Justice officials. The chairman talked about his law enforcement record. Let's look at it. The goal is clear. Replace these DOJ officials with unqualified MAGA loyalists who will rubber stamp President Trump's corruption. Under Mr. Blanche's leadership, more than 16,000 employees have left the department. 16,000 employees have left the Department of Justice, including more than a fourth of its attorneys. Many have been fired for declining to initiate vindictive prosecutions or refusing to follow unethical orders, like career immigration litigator Erez Ruvani, who refused an order from Mr. Blanche's former law partner, Amo Bove, to lie in federal court. Mr. Blanche bragged about firing career law enforcement officials simply because they were assigned to investigate President Trump's misconduct. Mr. Blanche is responsible for department losing thousands of years of law enforcement and national security expertise. This makes all of us less safe. Consider this quote. On Blanche's watch, the Trump DOJ has pursued an unabashedly vindictive agenda of leveraging the government's awesome prosecutorial powers in its public trust against the president's political enemies. These aren't my words. This is the conclusion of the National Review, the leading conservative publication founded by William Buckley. This isn't about Democrats versus Republicans. This is about rule of law versus lawlessness. The Attorney General is supposed to be the people's lawyer. Department of Justice should work on behalf of all the American people. Mr. Blanche continues to operate as the president's personal lawyer, treating the Justice Department like a law firm serving one client, the president. The president has made it clear he plans to keep Mr. Blanche in place as acting attorney general, a damning comment on his capacity to honorably serve in this role. This committee does not need to legitimate Mr. Blanche's appointment by providing our consent. I yield.
Before I call on Democrats to speak, I'd like to have Cornyn and Tillis have a few minutes, and then we'll go to the other side of the aisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Office of Attorney General is one of the most challenging jobs in the cabinet. You are at the same time the people's lawyer, as Senator Durbin has said, while you are a member of the president's cabinet, subject to being dismissed at the pleasure of the president. It is a very challenging balance to strike, to be sure. The tax lawsuit that was filed by President Trump and his son and the Trump Organization in January of 2026 was what prosecutors called unparalleled in the IRS's history. A contractor with Bose Hamilton got the job at the IRS for the express purpose of leaking tax returns, private tax returns that of people he thought the public needed to know about. That is a violation of the criminal law, and the contractor is currently serving a 5-year term in the federal penitentiary for that. Initially, when the president filed suit, he sought $10 billion in damages. That is nowhere to be found in the final settlement. The settlement documents also created a roughly $1.8 billion weaponization fund. That is no longer part of the settlement. I've been very clear, as others have, that in order to support Mr. Blanche's nomination, I needed specific assurances in writing about a release signed by the acting Attorney General last May. I asked for written assurances that clarifies the scope of the parties to the IRS audit agreement and that permanently ends the weaponization fund. While this may sound like nitpicking to some, it's critically important not only to me but to other members of the Senate. What Mr. Blanche said under oath in his nomination hearing on these topics was important. He said under oath, subject to the penalties of perjury, that he signed the release he signed only applies to the IRS and the Treasury and only the parties who were defendants and the plaintiffs. And he also said once more that the weaponization fund was dead. This past Sunday, Senator Tillis and I came to an agreement after numerous meetings with the Department of Justice and Mr. Blanche on an agency interpretative guidance document that reaffirms what Mr. Blanche said in his sworn testimony in front of the committee. This document will help limit the substance and scope of the audit protection to the defendants in the lawsuit, the IRS and the Treasury, and it limits it to the parties to the audit settlement. It limits the parties to the audit settlement to the plaintiffs, the people who brought the lawsuit, and no one else. And importantly, it was retroactive, stated to be retroactive, not prospective, doesn't apply to future audits, but does settle all claims that were subject to the lawsuit and those that could have been brought in that lawsuit. And again, importantly, it ends the weaponization fund. The DOJ has repeatedly said that this is their legal position and interpretation, including filings in the Floyd versus Department of Justice in the Eastern District of Virginia, and Dunn versus Trump and Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington versus Trump in the District of Columbia. They've been consistent about their assertion on behalf of the United States of America that the weaponization fund is dead. And of course, I expect them to live up to that in any future litigation. Given this agreement with Mr. Blanche, I expect the department to live up to this in future litigation, and I will vote to advance him out of the committee today. But my vote to advance Mr. Blanche's nomination goes beyond this document. We need a stabilizing force at the Department of Justice, and Mr. Blanche deserves the opportunity to provide that as opposed to continuing to serve in an acting capacity and as the Deputy Attorney General. The Department of Justice does not need a temporary, unconfirmed nominee as our nation's top law enforcement officer. President Trump needs someone in this role as well with a strong legal mind, but who also is close enough to him to give him confidential legal advice to tell him hard truths. I thought what Mr. Blanche said during his hearing was very important. He said, I can give the president confidential legal advice, but of course, he doesn't have to follow it. He was elected president of the United States and not me. That's the fact. I would advise Mr. Blanche not to be afraid to capitalize on that earned trust when necessary for the good of the country. I want to thank him for being willing to work with us, Senator Tillis and me, and I want to commend my staff, led by Francie Rooney and others, for their hard work on these negotiations. I'm glad we could address these issues here in committee so that this nomination can move forward, and I'm grateful to the chairman for giving me and Senator Tillis the latitude to do so.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Cornyn. I am by no means going to match up against Senator Cornyn, a lawyer and a former judge, except to say that I believe that we have addressed the concerns that I have. The first one I called the payout pot for punks. I've never liked this 1776 fund. It made no sense to me, and I thought it was an insult to the police officers and the people that defended us on January the 6th. It's done. It's been rescinded, and I am satisfied. I also feel like Senator Cornyn addressed the other piece of it that has to do with the audit to my satisfaction. You know, the thing that interests me, and I'm kind of curious about the speeches that come after here, is how everybody has this view of they are as pure as the driven snow, and it's the other side that has a problem. I think we both have a problem, folks. If you want to talk about weaponization, take a look at the Biden administration. Take a look at the Obama administration. Take a look at Crossfire Hurricane. Take a look at the codes that Lois Lerner used in the IRS to target businesses to try and unbank them. Take a look at the prospective pardons on the way out the door that President Biden did for family members, for staff members in Congress. The bottom line is nobody is clean here. And until we start recognizing this behavior as bad, we're just going to one-up it. Maybe it's a little bit more intense in this administration than the last one, and that a little bit more intense than the prior administration, and so on and so forth. But, folks, we've got to end this stuff. We do. I'm going to support Mr. Blanche's nomination, but what I hope I see out of him is a bending of the curve of this absurdity. The 86-47. Some bonehead in North Carolina thinks that that's a crime. Well, they better damn sure have information to back it up, because if all it is a picture, that person should lose his job, his or her job. Similarly, the people who went after Republicans in the Biden administration should probably be disbarred or disciplined. So at the end of the day, don't act like you're standing on some sort of moral high ground if you start attacking this administration, because I can match you almost deed for deed. What I would like to see here is maybe people saying, look at it, instead of criticizing people on the other side of the aisle, why don't you go back and hold your own caucus and your conference to a higher standard? That's what I'm doing. That's what Senator Cornyn's doing, and that's what I think the American people want more of. And Mr. Chair, thank you for your patience. I know from time to time I don't like delaying markups, but I thought that this was a very important one because we got to a good outcome. And I appreciate Mr. Blanche working in good faith, and I am prepared to vote yes today in his confirmation, or in moving his confirmation or nomination forward.
Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Today, I think, is a sad and embarrassing day for this committee. As it looks like on a party line vote, we are going to advance out of this committee probably the most discreditable person ever to seek the office of Attorney General of the United States. The reasons to vote against him number in the hundreds, but let's just focus on a few where my Republican colleagues purport to have great concern. Let's start with the Epstein files, where Todd Blanche participated in the cover-up, continues to participate in the cover-up.
In short, that is Sheldon Whitehouse, and he is not happy. We have been watching the Senate Judiciary Committee, who's meeting to vote on Todd Blanche Attorney General nomination. Coverage continues when Money, Power, Politics returns after a very quick break. Don't go anywhere. We're back with more coverage of the Senate Judiciary Committee meeting to vote on the confirmation of Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. Let's listen in to Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who, as I said before the break, he's not happy.
To the screw-up, to the botched release that even Pam Bondi pointed at Blanche as responsible for. And it gives the blessing to his continuing role in the cover-up of Epstein files. So there's Epstein for you. And let me ask the letter from the Epstein victims to Senators Tillis and Cornyn to be put into the record. So next we get to this crooked slush fund Trump family tax amnesty scam. Let's take a look at that. We've got these two new pieces of paper, one signed only by Todd Blanche, one not signed by anybody, neither of which has any legal effect whatsoever. They are decorative. So what problems do they leave behind? Well, one is, can you trust Todd Blanche going forward? I will tell you, I do not. I think it would be unreasonable to trust him going forward. There is enough weasel room in these documents to drive a truck through. And what might that truck look like? Well, you could get rid of the anti-weaponization fund for $1.776 billion, and in a month, put out the Trump Justice Fund for $1.9 billion. Nothing in this document prevents anything like that from happening. You could open a drive-up window at the Department of Justice for cop beaters from January 6 to come through and get friendly Federal Tort Claims Act settlements from the Department of Justice. They're already handing out settlements to Trump's allies. What's to prevent the drive-up window? Come on in. Here we are. We got the friendly form for you to file, and here's a check. Nothing prevents the cop beaters from being funded by the Trump Department of Justice. But let's assume that we really have made a big improvement here. Let's assume that the burglar has been forced to give back some of the jewelry he stole. Being forced to give back some ill-gotten gains doesn't mean you're not still a burglar. There's a question of the man's character, that he was willing to get into these schemes in the first place, into what George Will called the sludge of self-dealing of this administration. Even if there isn't Slush Fund 2.0, and even if there isn't the drive-up window for cop beaters, there's a real problem with an individual who would agree to that in the first place. To me, that should be disqualifying. And the last bit on that is how he got there. Let's not forget that there is an ongoing proceeding in Florida in federal court with an open question whether Todd Blanche committed a fraud upon the court. We don't hear that term, fraud upon the court, very often. It's probably the worst thing you can accuse someone of in a court proceeding. It means you're an officer of the court. It means you abused the process of the court, and you did so in order to accomplish an unjust and wrongful result. It's actually worse than contempt of court. It is so bad that in the history of the Department of Justice, no senior official has ever been even accused of a fraud upon the court. And we're advancing this guy before that question is settled in Florida, while there's still a bar issue, a disciplinary issue with the New York bar related to that misconduct. Fraud on the court is a big deal, and it's not going away. Then last of all, you've just got the general dishonesty and incompetence of the operation that Todd Blanche is running. And I'm not going to go through the list. It would take the whole day. But let me go through a couple of summaries of it. The Economist magazine, not exactly a left-wing publication, had its lead article, its cover article, on the U.S. Department of Justice, title, Degradation in Process. Degradation in process. I ask unanimous consent to add that article to my remarks.
Without objection. Sure.
Then here's a story from ProPublica. Federal judges chastise Trump's Justice Department for unlawful, unethical, and unseemly conduct. I'll just read the first sentence. Across the country, federal judges are calling out Department of Justice lawyers, questioning in unprecedented ways whether they can be trusted to tell the truth or uphold centuries-old legal norms. Ask unanimous consent that that article be added to the record.
Without objection. So ordered.
And then there's a group called Just Security, which reads through decisions from federal judges around the country and gathers the incidences in which the federal judge has challenged the integrity or the competence of the Department of Justice. It's about this thick. I'll just ask to have its introduction put into the record. If my colleagues want to go and look and see what the avalanche of misconduct that Blanche's leadership has precipitated looks like, you know where to find the report. Here's the introduction. It talks about the presumption of regularity, a judicially created doctrine with a long and contested history. The doctrine affords the executive branch a distinct advantage by instructing courts to presume that executive officials have properly discharged their official duties. And what the report characterizes is the destruction of that presumption of regularity in this Department of Justice. So I ask unanimous consent that that be added as well. And then, since I've mentioned it, I'll also ask George Will's article where I described his description of the settlement between the president and the executive branch he heads, exemplifying the administration's sludge of self-dealing. That also be added to the record.
Without objection. So ordered.
The last question that I'm left with here is what's left of this committee? What's left of this committee when we don't demand straight answers from witnesses? How many times has this Department of Justice been asked what became of the $50,000 that the FBI reported that it handed to Mr. Homan in a bribery sting? That's administrative stuff. That gets reported. There's an account. You've got to check the money out. If you get the money back, you've got to check the money back. There's an administrative trail. We can't get any information about that. Our Republican colleagues see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. Kash Patel virtually certainly lied to this committee sitting in front of us. Is there any interest in that? At a time when Republicans in Congress seem agitated about Biden officials lying to Congress? We got lies right here, folks. I don't know where this committee goes after it stops being taken seriously, because all you have to be is on the right partisan side to get this committee to roll over and play dead. Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you, too.
I want to bring into the conversation David Rode, MS Now senior national security reporter, Michael Schnell, and Barb McQuaid still here. Barb, Senator Durbin, I said it before, he is not happy. He straight up accused Blanche of lying under oath.
Yeah, he said that in his office, he represented that he made a mistake in setting up this slush fund and cutting this deal with Donald Trump. And then when he showed up in the hearing room under oath on television where Donald Trump could see him, he backed down and denied saying that. According to Senator Durbin, he said it in front of witnesses. And so that's a lie. But the real problem, I think, is that he is afraid to admit out loud to Donald Trump a hard truth. If he can't do it under these circumstances, under oath, what is he saying to him in private? And so it is so clear, based on what we heard from Senator Durbin, Senator Whitehouse there, that unlike every attorney general who's come before him, who understands that the job is to represent the United States of America, Todd Blanche sees his job as representing one client, that is Donald Trump, and that is not the job of the attorney general of the United States.
So, Barb, assuming Sheldon Whitehouse is correct and he lied under oath, there will be no consequences for Todd Blanche. Aren't we witnessing the exact reason Donald Trump was thrust onto the political stage, arguing that there are two systems of justice in this country, one for thee, not for me? Isn't that what we're seeing right here? And Sheldon Whitehouse might make a great argument, but it's just an argument to an audience that we're watching this, and it won't change. There will be no consequence. It won't change the results.
No, the way to prosecute a claim for lying before Congress is to refer it to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, so that case can be prosecuted. And the boss, ultimately, of that office would be Todd Blanche. So I don't think there will be any consequences here. It is, as Senator Whitehouse said, a very sad day for the United States, for this committee, and for the Department of Justice, when we've got someone who is willing to serve, who is going to serve one master and not his real client, the United States of America.
And let's be clear, David. Tillis said that the anti-weaponization fund is done, it's dead, it's been rescinded, but it hasn't been.
No, and we've talked to multiple legal experts. Lisa Rubin and our own people said the same thing. It's not done. And there's one thing, and I believe it was either Senator Corner or Senator Tillis I wanted to highlight. He praised this testimony from Todd Blanche about his role as the Attorney General and how he would deal with the president. And so Blanche said, and this is a totally different view of the president and the president's powers, but Blanche said in his testimony, he, the president, doesn't have to follow his legal advice. He was elected president of the United States, not me. So that's essentially an argument that the president, if you say, Mr. President, don't do this, you're going to break the law. The president can do whatever he wants. It's part of this whole unitary executive theory that the president alone should have all this power. He can be impeached by Congress. That's it. But we're just seeing this. The job of the attorney general, as Barbara said, is to enforce the laws of the United States. And if the president violates those laws, the attorney general would resign. That's what happened in Watergate. That's what happened when a generation stood up to an abusive president. And that's not happening today. It's a view that the president is like a king, can decide what's legal and illegal. And that's, to me, is what's so alarming about what's happening right now.
So, Barb, is that what you're interpreting? Todd Blanche is basically saying we're giving the president our legal view on our expertise. It's then his decision whether or not he wants to take it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I heard him to say. I completely agree with David. There's been, during Watergate, when Sally Yates was serving as the acting attorney general, this idea that I'm going to share the legal advice with you, but if you are going to do something illegal, my responsibility is to speak out by resigning and to share with the American people my view on that. Now, certainly there are some issues on which reasonable minds can disagree. But when the president does something blatantly illegal, I think it is the responsibility of the attorney general to flag that for the American people. And Todd Blanche seems to be saying just the opposite, that all I can do is give him legal advice and the president gets to do what he wants to do. I think that is reflected in his testimony when he says that he thinks it is the president alone who has the duty to execute the law. I think he is saying that when he allows the president's face to appear on a banner that hangs outside the Justice Department. Since Watergate, we have had a tradition of independence of the Justice Department, to be free from politics and to follow the rule of law. That is going to be abandoned based on everything we've already seen from Todd Blanche.
Barbara, thank you. David, thank you. Michael, thank you as well. We're going to keep watching this Todd Blanche hearing. Keep it here. You're watching Money, Power, Politics. We had another hour to go.